Welcome to TMFI, where I tell you too much information. This podcast is for anyone looking for a place to have open, honest conversations about menstrual cycles, mental health, self-image, and more sensitive topics that might just be considered too much information. Although PMDD is self-diagnosable, I am not a medical professional. I would recommend reaching out to a medical professional for an official diagnosis. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Welcome back to another episode of TMFI. I'm really excited for today's episode. I know that I've been kind of MIA for a couple of weeks, but had some life things going on, some family emergencies that couldn't be ignored, so had to take some time away to travel. But I'm back now and getting back into the groove of things, which means recording more episodes. And today's episode is one that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is sharing a story of a PMDD warrior. I feel like I've been talking about myself a lot for these past few weeks, and although I love sharing my stories and different things that I learn throughout my own journey, I do think it's really important to share the stories of other people just to get that wider variety of relatability. I also have some really exciting news coming up in the next few weeks, so very excited to share that as well, especially as we head into April, which is PMDD Awareness Month. Have a lot of cool things going on, and I'm really excited to take you guys along with me and to share what I am working on. Today I will be sharing Amy's story. Amy sent in her story via email. She's a PMDD warrior, and her and I connected on Instagram, and she asked if I would share her story. So, of course, I said yes, and she emailed it over to me, and we spoke about it, and today I get to share it with all of you. Without further ado, here is Amy's story. My name is Amy. I'm 29 and a PMDD warrior. My journey began when I started my period at the age of 13. I started to become very emotional, and I seemed to have no control or emotional regulation. Throughout my teenage years and early 20s, I was very erratic. I would be severely depressed and then really high and happy. I was tested for bipolar and BPD and diagnosed with BPD. I then went through dialectical behavior therapy, psychotherapy, and many other forms of therapy, but nothing seemed to change my ups and downs. Until 3 years ago, my mom started to notice that my episodes were always just before my period. I am very lucky to have an amazing best friend and therapist who also supported me and tracked my cycle with me. Then another friend showed me an article in a magazine about a girl with PMDD, and I just knew that was what I had. Over the next year, I began to track myself and really noticed that I would spiral badly in my luteal PMS phase. I went to the doctor and they put me on Yasmin, a contraceptive pill, to help my moods level out. Unfortunately, the pill started to clot my blood within a few months, so I had to come off of it. Coming off of it was very difficult and caused me to have more extreme anxiety than I had ever felt. I had gone from no tablets to being on blood thinners, anxiety medication, stomach liners, and was given an inhaler as I was struggling to breathe because my blood was thickening. I then got a UTI infection and felt I was overwhelmed with all these medications. So after a week, I trusted my body and refused to take anything else. Within another week, I began to feel physically better and started my mission to look at how to holistically heal my body and mind. I have always been a firm believer that my body can come back to homeostasis, but I am not naive to think that it's an easy task. It takes a lot of time and energy. Whilst I was doing this, my therapist referred me to a hormone clinic in London. I began to read into cycle syncing, researching herbal remedies, vitamins and minerals, and tracking everything within my luteal phase. I noticed my most debilitating symptoms were extreme fatigue, paranoia, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. I also noticed I struggled to feel any level of connection to anything around me as I went from day 4 to 1. So I began to observe my thoughts. Lucky for myself, I had traveled a lot over the years and stayed in Buddhist temples and silent retreats, so I know how to observe my thoughts and meditate already. I started to see that the fatigue would cause brain fog, leading to feelings of shame. The shame would cause me to feel paranoid that people didn't like me, that they thought I was lazy and useless. These feelings would lead me to having suicidal thoughts, like I should just give up, I'll never change, life is too hard. So I began to look up the best herbal remedies for extreme fatigue and brain fog. I started to look at my cycle as a test. Each luteal phase was the practical, and then the other phases I would observe and see what had happened. In depth. This was not easy. I would cry a lot. I was very scared of my ability to change and spiral, but I knew I had to change it. I tested for vitamin and mineral deficiencies and found nothing wrong. Then I found primrose oil and B6 tablets and began to take them in my luteal phase, as well as cod liver oil and magnesium. The combination of these three seemed to alleviate the fatigue and anxiety about 70%, which was amazing and allowed me to work on the other symptoms, paranoia and suicidal thoughts. By this point, I had finally heard back from the hormone clinic, who unfortunately refused me because I refused to take any more medication. I will say, I am not against medication, but it doesn't seem to work well for my body. I was angry, but I knew I needed and wanted to figure this out within myself, working this out in a holistic way. My next step was building a daily morning routine to support my mental health and self-love. I was now 28, and I was very aware that this wasn't my fault. This was a mental health condition. However, having spent my life in chaos due to my emotions, my thought processes and self-belief were really low. I was ashamed of myself, and I had struggled to keep jobs down for years because I was ill and wouldn't be able to get out of bed at certain times of the month, and I didn't know how to explain myself. My romantic relationships were really difficult too, and honestly, consistency had felt near to impossible. But I had always loved exercise, writing, and meditation. So I created a morning plan to get up at 6 a.m., work out, have a cold shower, do meditation, write a gratitude list, and journal. Each part of this plan was strategically placed for a certain symptom. I worked out to motivational music to get my head into self-belief. I had a cold shower to help my anxiety and support my ability to endure discomfort because my emotions can feel extremely intense and very uncomfortable. I meditated to focus my mind. I wrote a gratitude list to remind me of the simple good in the world so that when I'm feeling suicidal, I can remember. And I journaled to connect to God because I believe God can sustain me when I can't. I started this the day I came on my period to build momentum, and I saw a profound difference. I love nutrition too, so then began to focus on food a bit more. I don't like to stress this too much because food has been a big disorder for me, but I try to eat as good as I can and not allow myself to feel guilt for comfort food. Then, lastly, I started doing somatic therapy, tantric yoga, which has taken me to a new level. Each woman is built different, but I have a lot of trauma, which is activated again and again in my luteal phase. Meaning I needed to move the trauma through my body, which I have been doing and still do weekly and sometimes daily. I cry when I need to without placing a story behind it. I scream when I need to without placing a story behind it. I dance and flow the emotions through my body because emotions are just energy in motion, and I have learned not to be afraid of them. The more I did this and connected to my body, the more powerful my feminine energy became. I started to notice that in my luteal phase, I would see visions and dreams and get very strong wisdom and intuition that would lead me to support other women. I began to read into the divine feminine, and it became clear that the menstrual cycle is not a burden, but a superpower unutilized. Then, 6 months ago, I officially got diagnosed with PMDD and got offered tablets again. I refused and told the doctor about all I had learned. Unfortunately, it wasn't taken well, and this is when I decided that this is what I wanted to do for work. Now, I support women like myself to find their intuitive toolbox and power. I do still feel very emotional a lot in my luteal phase. I still do feel fatigued, anxiety, paranoid, and sometimes suicidal. But I have learned for the most part how to listen to my body through the flow of my cycle, and now I see these feelings and thoughts as signals rather than problems. I accept my diagnosis and have learned to work with it rather than fight against it, and I am no longer ashamed of it. This testimony was brought to you by Amy S., who is the health and wellness specialist at The Feminine Rhythm. Amy is offering complimentary consultations for listeners of TMFI, so make sure that you reach out to her on Instagram if that's something that interests you, at The Feminine Rhythm. You can also find her website at www.femininerhythm.co.uk. I really loved reading this, and Amy, if you're listening, I do thank you again for sharing this story with me. A lot of it is stuff that I relate to personally, as it's stuff that I'm working through myself. And some of it I feel like was just stuff that I needed to hear, especially where I am right now. As I'm recording, I am in PMDD. I'm on day 22, and it's been really hard. And I felt intrusive thoughts creeping in last night, and I found myself on the couch, unable to move, no motivation, no energy. And I just kept having to remind myself, this is a phase. This too will pass. Allow yourself the rest. If you push through this, you're just going to feel worse. And repeating those things to myself and realizing the power that just words can have led me to waking up this morning and having the energy to do yoga and having the energy to start a slow cooker meal so I have dinner ready tonight. And I know that if I had tried to push myself through last night, that today I would be feeling a lot worse. And if I didn't have the knowledge and the tools that I've gained over the past few months, then I also could have woken up this morning feeling guilty for lying on the couch last night. So realizing that there is a balance and you can have both of those things some days, or none of those things, or something completely different, and you don't have to react to your feelings, is something that's very powerful and has helped me a lot. But overall, I do think this was a beautiful story. I really hope that listening to this helps you or somebody you know with your premenstrual disorder, whether it's PMDD or PME, and I hope that this just gives you hope to know that you are not alone. It's not just me sharing my story. There are many other people out there who experience very similar, if not the same things. And if you feel compelled to share your experience, strength, and hope with this lovely community, feel free to email me at tmficast@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram or Twitter. If you or someone you know struggles with PMDD, follow the podcast social media accounts at TMFIcast on Instagram and Twitter. There, I post memes and resources relating to PMDD. Feel free to interact and let me know what you want to hear on the show. If you want to see what I'm doing outside of the show and how I'm healing through spirituality, food, and the arts, follow me on my social media accounts at Sassa the Scorpio. That's SASSA the Scorpio.